All right, welcome to VMware Explore 2024, Day 2. John, we just finished the general session. There's lots of great announcements. What are you excited about today?
So, again, going to a lot of these conferences, there's a lot of, buzzwords and terms. There's common themes. I'd like to think, you and I have been storage people a long time.
Yes.
But storage is still cool. Don't get me wrong on the block side. But I think we need to rebrand ourselves. I'm noticing a trend in another way. We're now data people.
We're data people, okay.
We the blocks and LBAs, they're there. We'll move them fast. We'll do snappy things. But I think we need to become data people. I think this is where the hype's going, and this is where a lot of the growth is. So
data's the new storage?
Yeah, data's the new storage.
I like it. Well, we're talking about a product that everybody, I'm sure, is familiar with in this area, the acronym DSM, Data Services Manager. And we're talking with one of the experts, one of the OGs of storage and data inside of VMware, Christos. Christos, welcome back to the podcast.
Glad to be back.
Yes. So Christos, Data Services Manager, been around for a little while now. What has been the trend for you? What have you been seeing talking to customers?
The trend, yes. I'll start from where you guys left it at. Data is the new storage,
there
right?
There you go.
Seriously now, everybody is using data. Data is as important as ever, even more important these days, especially with modern applications, use cases like machine learning and AI. Data is at the epicenter of all of these things. Now, the trend is really what is changing is how data is perceived, how data is consumed, right? And it's definitely at a higher level than what us, the old-timers in the storage industry, want to think about that. It's not about blocks or even files. It's about consuming databases and key value stores and big data in some form of some tabular format on a data lake or a lake house, as they're called these days. So really the trend is providing in the industry high-level abstractions that are much easier to be consumed and processed by applications.
And I remember, in my early years where I spent a lot of time dealing with just SANs and block, and then I got fancy and I learned a couple filers, and so the dial tone shifted from, the LUN to the NFS or SMB mount point. And I remember looking at databases back then, and comparatively, they were relatively small. We would have NAS systems that were growing, and we were hoarding lots of, frankly, inactive files. It was a kind of a cold data, and maybe you might go find something later. It was relevant. It was often compliance that drove that expansion. But I look at some of these databases now, and I talk to the Greenplum people, or I look at some of the NoSQL things. These things look enormous.
Oh, absolutely.
I couldn't imagine trying to run SQL 2005 or, some ancient version of MySQL on this stuff, and these things are growing, they're scaling. What is driving that? How are the platforms adapting to it? What has changed about this dial tone as we've gone from that SMB or that SIFs?
You're right, because in even 10 years ago, databases were all about operational data, transactions. So by definition, that data is not, huge volume. Very important always, don't get me wrong, but not huge volume. But now, modern applications drive a proliferation of different types of kind of data services, key value stores, document databases. Now we have vector DBs, we have lake houses, which are like data lakes with some transactional semantics. So it is, first of all, we have much more data produced, but also data that are of different nature, not the traditional OLTP, operational, relational database, but time series and logs and documents, lots of them. We have industry sectors that the vast majority of the data they produce is some sort of a document or images, right? Take a healthcare sector, for example. So what is happening now, there is a whole new generation of databases, let's call them generically databases, that store other types of data in not only this kind of raw format transactional data we knew from the past. And that's why you see this kind of growth of the volume of the data that are stored under these databases, growth of the number of different types of databases, because now there's specialization. There are time series and vector DBs and key value stores. So, and this proliferation of this, let me call it the heterogeneity of databases, is driven by modern applications, because modern applications are designed to take advantage of the specifics of different data services.
When I think back, if I walked into an enterprise 10 years ago, I would say, okay, are you a SQL Server shop or are you an Oracle shop? Or are you a MySQL? you generally had one database that they just kind of kludged everything into, even if it didn't make sense. Like they're trying to do the equivalent of like a log insight type platform into a SQL database, and it scaled horrifically. But like, and they might have like a small science fair experiment, Postgre in the corner, PG doing something else. But what are some of the use cases that are driving some? It's like VectorDB. You mentioned that one. Like, what's that being consumed by?
These new types of data services and databases are driven by the application team. So it's usually are in the lines of business. All the oracles and those kind of things.
It's no longer infrastructure dictating the database. Exactly. It's the application team dictating from infrastructure what they'll provide.
In fact, application teams often run ahead with their own choice of databases, irrespective of what the IT team thinks, right? And that's where I have actually lots of problems with customers, and this is part of the problem.
Lifecycle security, like I know how to secure the one database that I was running, but I don't know how to secure these three other kinds.
I was talking with a customer, and they're saying that they're discovering that they have hundreds of instances of various open source databases across the company. They didn't even know exactly what they have.
Shadow IT is alive and well.
I was about to say, this is Shadow IT. This is that little computer. Don't touch that computer. No one knows what it does.
When I thought of Shadow IT, though, I used to think of like, that rogue, like, 3-tier app stuffed onto an Optiplex under a desk. Right. But now it's, like fairly large data sets are cropping up.
Oh, absolutely. And business critical data sets. Yes. In fact, this person was telling me that they have the enterprise data warehouse, but they create snapshots out of this, which are used by various lines of business, for example, the marketing team, to do analysis. And say, they take that data, they put somewhere, who knows where, and I don't even know if that data is really compliant.
This isn't a data lake. This is like a data oil spill waiting to happen. This is a super fun site hiding in the corner.
You know something about those things.
Yeah, he's from Texas, exactly.
So yes, that's exactly the problem. So now this. Don't get me wrong, this is not negative, right? These application teams had to move fast. They could not really afford to wait for the IT teams with their ticket-based systems, create a database for me, and then wait for like 3-4 days until that database created, right? Let alone a couple of more days until the DBA goes there and tunes the database.
Well, and people were going to public cloud for this, because that is one thing the public clouds were historically good at, was delivering database as a service and self-service and multi-dial tone data access.
We all know that RDS on AWS is one of the most popular services they have. But also, even on private environments, the application teams went and running and operating their own databases, often with bespoke tooling, right? So. And that's what's created this kind of really patchwork of different databases and operational processes, which were like, a liability, a disaster in the waiting, also inefficient in terms of operations. So, and I'm going back now to data services manager. What we're trying to do in VCF is provide the tools to the IT teams to be able to manage much more diverse set of databases or data services in general at a much larger scale, so that they can provide this as a service to the application teams that can consume it like self-serve. And by that I don't mean just provision the database, but programmatically create 100 instances of a database for testing purposes during the day, right? Create a clone and make sure that the database meets the performance requirements and the SLAs that the application they are building has. This kind of life cycle, the application life cycle,
patching it. Yeah, exactly. Those rogue databases end up on some version of MySQL, from the Thatcher administration or something ancient, because it never gets life cycled. It's outside of the normal
scope. And talking about life cycle, you also want to have the IT team and the data experts, even the DBAs that are still around in the many organizations, to be in charge of compliance, right? Make sure that if there is any known security vulnerability, the entire fleet of, say, 2,000 database, Postgres or MySQL database across the company is patched in a timely fashion, right? Or backup and disaster recovery is really designed, and we can have can do audits and can ensure that we are all compliant, especially in the highly regulated industries.
Yeah, that gets really fun when you have one of these shadow IT databases, and that the server dies or that storage system gets decommissioned and people realize it wasn't backed up. No one knows where it was. I've seen a horror story where someone lost, basically it took them $3 million to rebuild the data set because of one of these specific environments.
Yes,
well, this is exactly what customers are looking like. That's why we had Shadow IT in the first place, because this wasn't available. So if it's not available, I'm resourceful. I'll find it. I'll get it online. But I'm not going to think about all the extra things like management and backup and recovery. I'm just going to make sure it works, and then it suddenly finds its way into production, and I'm in trouble, right?
Correct.
So I like the idea. So VMware Cloud Foundation, DSM is part of that as an add-on. So we're here at Explore. Have there been
Actually,
any
it's not an add-on. It's part of VCF. We do not really.
I knew that. I said the wrong thing. You're absolutely right. It's not an add-on. It's built into the core
component.
offering.
It's built in VCF. It is inherently a part of VCF.
Yeah.
Because really, databases now are part of the cloud infrastructure, right?
Yep.
If you look at the analyst reports, they consider database services as part of the core cloud services anyone would expect in public or private cloud. So yes, it's part of VCF. Now we do provide enterprise support, for example, for Postgres. And for that, there is an additional charge as part of currently the pay for SKU. And in the future, our goal is still for VMware to be there for our customers, for all these databases we offer we support. And so the customers can offer database as a service to their own internal users and have the back, and VMware has their back in terms of enterprise support. Either us or for certain engines, we're going to have the partner that we work closely with to provide enterprise-grade support for whatever those data services are. One example, if I may include it here, is the announcement we made with Min.io. We're going to use DSM to provide object storage as a service.
Oh, wow.
And
that's not just databases now. We're talking other data services. So.
Yes. Object storage is an example of where we expand to. We're partnering with the best object storage offering in the industry outside the public clouds. And not only we're going to integrate with VCF through Data Services Manager, so it's like a native experience. The same way we will provision and manage vSAN, you'll be able to provision now and manage object storage. And down the road, we're going to support multi-tenancy with VCD or the native VCF multi-tenancy in the future in 9X. And for the user, it's going to be a VCF feature. The IT team will be able to provide either entire object storage instances or object storage buckets to the tenants, so we can be consuming them on their own. So that's the idea.
Well, that was something that I started noticing is increasingly, it used to be I would set up some type of infrastructure tool and it would say, okay, give me a disk attached to this VM. And then it got to okay, where's the NFS share to dump these things? And increasingly these new services, they're saying, where's the S3 bucket? They don't even offer NAS.
Yes.
If you're operating at cloud scale, you're expecting...
Where is the S3 bucket? Where is my, key value store or my in-memory cache service, right? And
where's my syslog target? And if we can provide all the services natively as part of VCF.
Yes, right, absolutely. I was I'll give you a little anecdote. I was at a dinner party and I met this young guy recently out of school, working some, I'm not going to name which company, but some popular San Francisco-based, hyperscaler. And I was asking, I was describing the application, was building some geo-tagging or something like that. So what storage do you guys use for this application? So it's a combination of Postgres and Cassandra. So no, not what database, what storage? Dude, as far as I'm concerned, the storage, the persistence tier of this is those two databases, right? That's what I code against. That's the new era.
That's actually a good thing that he doesn't know. He doesn't need to know. The lower end.
Hey, as long as storage is delivering the speed, the performance, and the data services to meet the needs, we should be boring. When we start not doing that, things get exciting in a bad way.
We should strive to be boring. If people don't know what storage they use, that is good news.
That's exactly right. So you've been in this industry for a while. I mean, heck, you've been one of the early starters of vSAN, in terms of coming up even with some of the concepts.
Well, the starter.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what do you I started with the trend. I'm curious, where do you see now, DSM? What do you see the future for DSM looking like? And data in general.
Right. I mean, let me start with data. Like there's going to be even more heterogeneity of data services that the applications need to use. There are going to be a growth in a number of instances of such databases, and define instance. Now this is becoming fuzzy, but instance is like something, a chunk of data that an application uses. And I'm saying this is becoming fuzzy because today we have this kind of the server-based model, but increasingly a serverless model is going to becoming more popular for at least certain use cases. And
and
this
they'll
is
choose the right platform for the right. I mean, we think back 30, 40 years ago, you said, what database you have? We have one DB2 instance on one Z series, and that's it. And then, okay, the Wintel kits came in, you started, maybe you had an Oracle or that, and it slowly started proliferating to where each line of business might have one database. And it sounds like we're going to where each line of business will have one database with a bespoke choice per app, potentially.
Or many. So I think there's going to be an order of magnitude more types of databases and 2 orders of magnitude more instances of database. So that is the challenge. So those are the trends, and those are the trends we're trying to.
We're going to have to automate, otherwise the lifecycle will murder us all. Everybody in ops will go insane. So.
A typical VMware customer 10 years ago had a couple of dozen Oracle instances, for example, right? Yeah. Now the same customer has 2,000 to 3,000 Postgres instances alone, let alone another database, right? Again, this is all driven by the modern application.
Sure.
So how do you manage, how do you upgrade, or how do you patch 2,000 instances of Postgres? You cannot do that manually.
Clips up just don't work.
You cannot go like the traditional database management tools. You go connect to the database,
one at a time.
One at a time. No, you cannot do that, right? So that's exactly what we do. And now VMware, we have been doing these things, infrastructure, upgrades and patching.
Of course.
You can argue, our customers have given us a lot of positive and negative feedback over the years. We are striving to become better, but we know this area very well, and we apply this expertise now to these new components of the infrastructure, the data services.
Well, it all comes back up to the common value proposition of being in this business for a long enough time to have core things like vSphere and and the management and all these features working together. They just complement each other. Like
absolutely.
Every single one of these, it's like, we can lean on that DRS, we can lean on that this performance. You can use vSAN, etc. So
perfect. I mean, exactly like in DSM, if you see, we introduced this concept of infrastructure policies, which actually specify which vSphere cluster, which resource pool you want to provision the different databases, and actually this provides a powerful tool to the IT teams to provide guardrails about what the application guys can do. Right?
Yeah.
You don't want to pre-provision database randomly anywhere, right?
We gave them an API endpoint, and suddenly all of Prada's in the DMZ for some reason.
Exactly. Similarly, vSAN now has these amazing features. We have really instantaneous, very cheap clones.
Yep.
Infinite practically. So that's a huge tool. Imagine now creating a replica or a clone of a database instantaneously, fractions of a second.
Yeah.
That's an extremely powerful tool. So we're integrating with that. It's not like, in the past to create a replica.
If I want to make 5 copies of an 80 terabyte database, one, I need a lot of storage. 2,
and a lot of time.
I had a lot of time to stare at it.
Right, exactly. So we're, as you said, we are integrating with all these capabilities we have in the underlying platform, both storage and compute and even networking, and make things very simple. Talking about networking, virtual IPs, right? And for instantaneous failover of the database if something happens. So it's also used for very useful for non-disruptive upgrades, rolling upgrades. Those are the kind of features we're integrating, and that's why we're in the best position to provide something like a data service manager.
We don't have to reinvent all this stuff; it's already there.
Yes.
Very good. Well, Christos, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I'm so glad we got to see you again at VMware Explore, and I look forward to the next time we talk.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to that too.